And here's a little bit about me. I've been with Intuit for 7 years. Like I just said, I'm in snowy Naperville, Illinois, and my role is really around education with QuickBooks Online, helping firms move to the cloud and become what we consider a firm of the future. So today we are diving into payroll. We're going to talk about the payroll options inside of QuickBooks Online. We'll go through the fundamentals of what it looks like to pay employees, handle payroll taxes, run reports, a little bit on user permissions, especially because there's been some changes there. And then we'll spend the last part of the webinar going through some considerations for who's the best fit client for the payroll products inside of QuickBooks Online. We will also talk through what setup and conversion looks like if we're getting started with payroll, particularly if you are converting a client from QuickBooks Desktop and running payroll there. What does it look like if we're switching from one product to the other? So hopefully that sounds great to everybody. A couple of housekeeping things. There is the question and answer box. If you've got questions throughout the webinar, feel free to ask them in there, and Stephen or myself will answer those. If you want a copy of my slides, there's a handout section in your GoToWebinar panel where you can download the PDF of those. And then I might ask a couple of polling questions just to get a feel for who's here. And let's kick off with one of those, actually. Let's dive in. And I am going to spend time in the product today, but I do have some slides to get us grounded on what these options are and what things look like as we get going. So there are two payroll options available inside of QuickBooks Online. There's our QuickBooks Online Enhanced Payroll, which some people call regular or do-it-yourself, and then there's the full service option. So let's talk about Enhanced first. We support all 50 states. You can pay W-2 employees as well as contractors through this subscription, print paychecks, or use our 24-hour direct deposit. Pay federal 941, 944, 940 taxes and file forms electronically. That's included in the subscription to turn on the federal filing. And then when it comes to states, electronically where available. If a state doesn't have an offering for electronic, we'll do print-ready forms and give you the instructions for handling those. But a lot of states do support electronic for income tax and unemployment insurance, both or one or the other. Kind of depends on the state. There are a few that don't have that. And I've got, at the very end, we'll talk through some resources, and I've got some articles that have some of that state-by-state information that I'll share with you. 24-hour direct deposit, real quick on that. This is fairly new. It allows you to approve the direct deposit by 5 o'clock Pacific time and have payday the next day. Instead of having to approve 2 business days prior to payday, which is what our former process looked like. We introduced 24-hour direct deposit not too long ago, so keep that in mind. Definitely helps get folks paid faster, helps your small business clients hold on to that cash for an extra day and have some flexibility. We don't do any tax impounding, so we'll prompt for when taxes are due, but we aren't holding on to that money for the client. And you can create W-2s and file electronically at year end. And the online payroll subscription is accessible from the browser. That's where I'm going to be demoing today. But I'm also going to give you a touch of what it looks like if you're running payroll on the go with an iPad or an iPhone. We have an app for those and an app for Android as well. And there is a wholesale discount available through QuickBooks Online Accountant. If you subscribe a client to QuickBooks Online with payroll, wholesale's 50% off the life of both products. And then QuickBooks Full Service Payroll. So that's the do-it-yourself, right, enhanced. Full Service Payroll has the functionality of enhanced, but the payroll taxes are done on behalf of the client. So client takes care of, or you, depending on your engagement, one of the users takes care of submitting payroll, right? And then the tax payments and form filings are handled on Intuit's side. Same day direct deposit, so taking it a step further than 24-hour if you're using full service. you have added flexibility. You can approve the direct deposit paychecks up to 7 a.m. Pacific time on payday, assuming payday is a banking business day. Now, I still suggest, try and run payroll at least a business day before. But, we think of somebody misses that deadline, or an emergency comes up, or, somebody didn't submit their timesheet. You get rid of that worry. As long as we approve things by 7 a.m. Pacific time that day, the employees will receive their funds later in the day. And then the W-2s are filed and mailed to the employees. There's expert help during setup. Kind of have like that white glove service, if you will, of getting everything going, and accuracy guaranteed. So as long as all that information is correctly inputted, then we assume the responsibility for getting the taxes paid accurately and on time. And we've got some information if anyone needs to learn more about that. We have some articles and things that detail that further. All right, so those are the two payroll options inside of QuickBooks Online. Let's get into some of the fundamentals here. I like to start off by getting us grounded in how the payroll subscription works in relationship to QuickBooks Online. So these payroll products that we're talking about today are embedded inside of QuickBooks Online, meaning you turn on that subscription and you're accessing everything within QBO. But the payroll data only moves in one direction. So when we think about working in payroll and working with the different transactions that happen here, right? The actual paychecks, the tax payments, those activities should be completed within the payroll pages of QuickBooks Online, being the Workers tab and the Payroll Tax tab. So if somebody's getting started with this, I definitely, let them know, hey, you want to make sure that you create the paychecks there. You're not writing checks to the tax agency. You're not setting up bills for those tax payments, because those things aren't going to impact the to-do items, the liabilities, the forms of the payroll reports. So kind of keep that in mind going through. If any of you use apps for QBO, a lot of the times apps kind of move in one direction, right? We kind of can think of the payroll subscription like an app. It's something added on. It's inside of QuickBooks Online, but the things we do in payroll will flow into QuickBooks Online. The only thing that kind of comes out of QBO and goes into payroll is time, and we'll get to that in a bit here. And then before I jump into the product in our browser, I wanted to show you a little bit of what it looks like to run payroll on the go. I talk to a lot of accountant users that say, hey, the mobile app thing, that's not really for me. But I encourage you to think about your employers, right? Your small business clients that are probably very busy, probably out and about all the time running their businesses, and may really benefit from the option of setting up the app and being able to enter and view hours, review and approve payroll from wherever they are. And if they're using that enhanced payroll, even take care of getting the taxes paid. So there is a QuickBooks Payroll app. It's in the App Store for iPhones and iPads, and in the Google Play Store for Android, called QuickBooks Payroll. And they sign in with their QuickBooks Online credentials, and it pulls up the payroll information. And this is a little of what it looks like. So when you go into pay employees, it lists any hours that are recorded in the timesheets in QBO, or we could input them from here. And then I could open each of these individual checks if I needed to make some changes to what's there or look at it more closely. And then the next page gives me a preview of what the payroll is going to look like if I'm using, and we'll get into direct deposit and paper check settings, but depending on what I've got set up for that employee, I'll see those things here. It'll be pending until I click that approve button, and it lets me know what needs to happen, right? We scheduled the delivery of your direct deposits, and you've got to go in and print and deliver those paper checks. These screenshots are from December, but I think you get the idea, and we would be able to review those details. And then if tax payments are due, we could handle those from within the app as well. I have a friend who has a business, and she says, I run payroll when I'm waiting for my kids in line for school. That's the great time for me to remember to do it and kind of kill time in my car. And I think she tries to, do it maybe a day in advance versus waiting to the last moment, but great to have that option. Okay, I'm going to jump into QuickBooks Online so we can look at this more closely, but running it in the web browser, we go into the Workers tab to run payroll, or the Taxes tab to pay taxes and file forms. Now that Taxes tab is going to look a little different if we're using the full service payroll product, right? Because Intuit's handling those steps on your behalf. And so that's where you would go to see what tax payments and forms are being taken care of and what's happened so far. Okay, and one more note. User permissions. This comes up a lot. I get a lot of questions around this. Client users, when you're setting up client users in QuickBooks Online, there's a handful of options, and depending on what you choose, there's payroll access or there's not. So the master admin and company admin, they've got payroll access, right? They can see everything going on in the books. A standard user has an option now for no payroll access. So it used to be that you didn't have a checkbox to click off for no payroll access, but we do now. If you set up time tracking only users, those are available in QuickBooks Online Essentials and Plus, no payroll, just time. So all they see when they sign into QuickBooks Online is the option enter time. And then Plus has reports only users as an option. They don't see payroll reports. So they see all the other reports in QBO, but they won't see payroll, and they won't see anything with customer or vendor contact information either. Accountant users will have company admin level permissions. As you probably know, if you are invited in as an accountant or you're a team member in a firm's QuickBooks Online accountant account, you can see everything the client sees, plus you've got your additional accountant cleanup tools for QBO, and you will have payroll access. Now, something to keep in mind, we don't allow you to have multiple people in the payroll screens at the same time. So if someone else is signed in to QBO and they're in payroll, you'll get an error message saying, hey, somebody else is using this. So kind of keep that in mind. It makes sense though, right? You don't want multiple people creating the same paychecks or paying the same tax payments, especially if you've got things set up electronically. All right. I tend to talk too fast sometimes in the afternoon. So let me know if we're doing well so far. Okay, so I am signed into one of my clients that has a payroll subscription. If you haven't seen this already, we now have an overview tab when you're signed in as an accountant. As it says here, it's an accountant only view, and it gives you a snapshot of what's going on with your client, including what subscription level they have, right? So if they're using QuickBooks Online Plus, I'd see that. If they have payroll, it would show me whether it's enhanced or full service payroll. So nice to get a quick glance at what your client's using if they set this up themselves, right? And they come to you and they already have it. Let's go down into the Workers tab. So this is where we manage employees, contractors, and there's a tab here for workers' comp as well. I'm not going to click through every single page of the payroll product today, but I do want to show you a couple of the things involved in setting up or editing employees. And then we'll get into some of the company payroll settings, and then we'll run payroll. So if I'm setting up an account from scratch, right, I'd be entering employee information in, getting year-to-date stuff entered in. We're going to go through what all the steps of that look like towards the end of the webinar, because I know that's not applicable for everyone. But this is a client that already has payroll going, right? They've been running payroll already this year. They already have employees. So we're just going to edit or review an employee's profile. So I've opened someone up, and we have tabs in the employee details for profile and employment. If I click the pencil for pay, it's going to guide me through all the details within each of these sections. Oh, I'm looking, I see a question here. Trying to follow along using the handout. It appears I'm not following the handout. hopefully I've given you all the slides that I'm going. I might have rearranged a couple of things, and I'm sorry about that. The in-product stuff that I'm showing is not in the handout. This is all live in the product, but I'm sorry if I moved a few things around and didn't move them in the PDF, but it should all be the same content. I don't think I've taken anything out. Sorry about that. Okay. All right, so in my employee's pay profile, there's my 5 sections here. Each of these pencils allow me to either review what's turned on or make changes, right? So if I go into withholdings, I'll see the employee's W-4. And throughout the payroll product, you can kind of collapse and expand these carrots to see more details. I know sometimes folks don't realize to click into those to expand to see the extra information. So usually you'd have an employee that only has one state perhaps, but if there are multiple states involved, then you would see those things. And then if there's any sort of tax exemptions, those can be turned on here as well. Those aren't common, but that is where they would be selected. Next on the list, how often do we pay Leah? So her pay period will show here. And the drop down here will show the pay periods that we support and allow you to make some selections. I like that we give that option of using the schedule for employees that we add. So if you've got everybody on the same pay schedule, it's easy to not have to reinvent the wheel each time. And you can name the pay schedules as well. Pretty straightforward. And then we get into how much do you pay? And this is where I would set up if this employee is hourly, salary, commission only. If they are hourly, I could set up multiple hourly rates. So there's one here, I can give it a name and make an indication, check and uncheck those. Now, the reason one of these is sort of showing up pre-filled but unchecked is that that's an hourly rate maybe that's set up on another employee. So you can apply that same, rate name across multiple employees. Now, when you first come into this, the other ways to pay might be collapsed or expanded, right? If we haven't chosen some of these, it might have just the first few and then give you an option to expand to see all of them. So I know in December when I did this webinar, we had folks asking about S-Corp owners' health insurance and personal use of company cars, some of those fringe benefits. So you can turn those on from here. As I'm turning things on, anything that has a pencil can be renamed, and there's options to add, multiple types of some of these. You'll see that some of them will offer the option to have a recurring amount. If you leave that box blank, you'd fill it in when payroll is run, or in this case, if we're making a fringe benefit only check. So really important that if we need to pay an employee with a certain pay type here, that we have it turned on in their profile so that it shows up as an option when we run payroll. And then we get into deductions, contributions, those things. If I were to edit that, it guides me through choosing if it's a deduction or contribution or a garnishment, and then guides through some questions around that. We can choose from things that have already been set up in other employees' profiles, or select to create a new one and go through the process of making the selections, right? If it's health insurance, it's going to pull up the types and kind of guide you through what it's going to appear as on the paycheck and all of the details like taxable, insurance premium, pre-tax, those types of things. So this, of course, can vary depending on the selections you make as you're setting it up. But then once we set it up for one employee, it'll show up as a drop-down option on the next employee that we add in. And, of course, we can make edits to existing things from here as well. And then how do we want to pay this employee? Paycheck, direct deposit into 2 accounts, direct deposit with the balance as a check, or a paper check. Now, I don't have direct deposit turned on in this test environment, but I will talk through a little of what that looks like if you're utilizing it. But for the sake of simplicity, we're doing a paper check. When you first create checks, it'll guide you through doing the printer setup. I'll also show you where that lives in the payroll settings. All right, and then we would get into the employee's profile. These are pretty straightforward, things like home address and email and phone numbers. Information here might, be required if it's needed for any state forms for that employee. And then the employment section, there's the option to enter an employee ID if that's being utilized. This is where we indicate the status. So if somebody doesn't need to be on payroll anymore for any of these reasons, active employees are going to be the ones that are showing up when we go to run payroll. And then the payroll subscriptions, you have a base fee plus an employee surcharge per month, and it's going to look at which employees are active. You can have unlimited payroll runs in a monthly period. So we don't do like a charge per payroll. We do a charge per employee per month based on the active employees. Hire date, work location. You can set up multiple work locations if needed. That's why we're seeing in this client they've got some employees. I think their addresses are in Arizona, but the work location's California. So we can do some multi-state support there, and then workers' comp class. And that's about it in a nutshell for the employee profile. I did want to make one note. In the area where we had the email address, you can, when you enter an email address for an employee, it'll guide you through if you want to set up for them to be able to view their pay stubs online. So that after payroll is run, when the employee signs into this portal, View My Paycheck, they'll see their pay stubs on payday. And then the paycheck list will show paychecks that have happened already. And I can narrow this down to see by different periods, of course. So you can see everything in the first quarter, open the details of that from here. When we go back to the employee list, we also have a link to the paycheck list where we can see all the paychecks for all the employees that have happened. By default, it's going to show last payday, but we could narrow it down to see additional details. Couple of things in the payroll settings, and then we'll run payroll. So under the gear, we have an option for payroll settings, and it pulls up this preferences window. Now this is going to look different if you're in full service payroll versus the enhanced payroll. So I'm in the do-it-yourself, where there are a lot of options here that are related to the taxes and some of the other kind of preferences that on full service payroll, because we're guaranteeing that accuracy, we want you to work with us if you need to make any changes to those things after setup, just to make sure that if there's any tax implications, they are addressed accordingly. But let's go through a couple of the things that show up in here. I'm not going to go into every page. Pay schedules, vacation sick, deductions and contributions. This is looking at it at the company level. So for pay schedules, you'd see any that have been set up. If I edit them, it will show me which employees are on this schedule. This particular client only has one pay schedule with all the employees on it, but we could see this and make changes to it kind of at that high level if needed. Vacation and sick leave policies will show here as well, and we can get that set up or create new policies for our company. Tax setup. Tax information, federal tax information, state information, all of that will show here. This is where we would go if, I know this is common this time of year, say my client got a new state unemployment insurance rate, right? We would click into their state and change or add new rate for that, put the effective date. This is the do-it-yourself version, right? So we're having you do this yourself and get that all going. With full service, we have you contact us because we want to make sure that it's accurately put in and everything is good going forward. Deductions and contributions also at the company level. And then if we go into the other preferences section, we'll see accounting preferences, paycheck printing settings, W-2 printing settings, email, and so on. So accounting preferences. This is important. This is where we tell payroll where to put these things in QuickBooks Online, in the general ledger. So bank account that's being used, when I choose these drop-downs, it's guiding me through selecting the account from the chart of accounts. So it guides me through making those selections. For things like the wage expense accounts, the tax expense accounts, liability accounts, all of that, there are some options within this, right, of things like all employee wages go to the same accounts, or I use different accounts for different groups of employees, or different accounts for different wages. So you can fine-tune this a little further. There are some defaults that it'll set up if you never go into this window and make changes to it. If I were to make changes to where one of these things are going to land, it'll ask me, hey, is this a change you want to make in the books going forward, or do you want to make a retroactive change? So keep that in mind as we're going through as well. We're not going to change anything for now. Oh, I guess I must have making a selection for classes. So sometimes when you save something there, you get a screen and you go, ooh, that looks white, but just scroll up and make sure that it didn't somehow kind of bounce you down. Here's what I was talking about. Do you want to update existing transactions and have a starting date on it? So we will leave that alone for now. Let me go back to my preferences. Okay, so I can tab through those along the top as we were saying, or if I come to this main page, I have my options. Let's run payroll, and we can come back to a couple of these things later after we go through reports. Okay, somebody's asking, how do you change the preferences for accounting if they were set up wrong? You would go into this payroll settings area, go into accounting, and make those changes. And then when you continue through, it'll bring up that box along the bottom that asks you, what's the starting date for these changes? Do you want to go kind of retroactive, or just have this be a change going forward? So yes, when you save that, it'll ask you that. Great question. Okay, so we're going to go back into workers and employees to run payroll. A note on running payroll. We have this big button in the upper right. If you choose the little drop down next to run payroll, you'll have some options if and only if one or more employees has these things turned on. So if none of my employees have bonus turned on as a pay type, I'm not going to see the option to create a bonus-only paycheck. Same goes for commission, same goes for fringe benefits. So if you don't see anything here, we've got to go into the employee's profile and turn some of those things on if we want to run one of these types of paychecks. Now, do you have to run a bonus-only check? No, you can include it in running payroll and have it just included inside the paycheck. But if we did a bonus only, it's going to guide me through doing a net pay or as gross pay, and kind of going through those steps of running a special one-time kind of payroll for bonuses. All right, let's run kind of standard payroll. Oop, forgive me, that's my computer's backup completed, nothing inside the product. All right, so along the top, we're going to see that banking account and the balance. The pay period is going to populate. Because I've been running payroll already, it's populating, kind of based off of the last payroll that was run, and the pay date is automatically filling in. Now, it's if my pay period is ending on Friday, chances are I'm not creating the paycheck for Monday. So maybe in this test account, we need to go back in and have the pay period end on a different day. But, maybe tomorrow I would run this payroll for a 28th pay date. So you can go through and set that up to, of course, give time for processing. Now, all of my employees are on the same biweekly pay schedule here. If there were multiple pay schedules, I would pick which one and then run payroll for the employees that are on that schedule. They are selected here, but I could deselect somebody if there was somebody that wasn't getting paid. Now, we have to ask ourselves if they're showing up here but they're not getting paid, should they be an active employee, or do we need to go into their profile and change the status, of course. Kind of moving from left to right here, so I can check off the employees that are going to be paid. I will see when I hover over this icon what the method is for them from their profile. All of these employees are being paid by Paycheck. If somebody or everyone was being paid by direct deposit, I would have the option to change it to a Paycheck if I needed to do that one time, or I would see, kind of how it's set up. Salary employees, I can click on their salary that's been calculated for that pay period and make an adjustment, right? Do I need to skip salary this time? Do I need to adjust it? And apply those settings. But we'll leave this as their regular salary. The hours here are populating because I have these employees set up as time tracking users, and they're entering time into QBO using the timesheets. Or maybe you've got a time tracking app. So T-Sheets by QuickBooks is our time tracking app where the employees can track their time. You can set up a station for people to clock in and clock out. You can have people clocking in and clocking out on their phones. It does GPS-enabled time tracking. It has a lot of bells and whistles. And we do have some webinars just on T-Sheets alone. But if T-Sheets is being used, or one of those other time tracking apps that we have in our apps.com ecosystem, that data from the time tracking app will populate into QBO's timesheets, and then whatever's there will push into payroll. So that's why we're seeing time data in. Now, if we're not using timesheets inside of QBO, or we're not using one of the apps that connects up to QBO, we can enter in the time, right? I could type in the numbers here, and I can even use my tab to kind of cycle through. Likewise, if we needed to add anything, bonus, commission, those types of things, looks like there's a number of options turned on in one of the employees' profile, maybe different things turned on in someone else's. So the boxes will show up based on what's turned on in that employee's profile. Now, these are the things that sort of happen up front, and then if I were to scroll all the way over, I would see if an employee has fringe benefits, right? Those are kind of after the total pay column, if I needed to add those on this particular payroll run. So keep that in mind. You might need to scroll from left to right if your client has a lot of stuff turned on. Okay, but we're going to leave this as pretty straightforward and simple, and go into previewing our payroll. Now, actually, before I do that, you do have the option to click the little pencil on the total pay to open up the details of that paycheck and do some overrides if necessary. Of course, we would use this with caution. So, this will pull up the breakdown of the paycheck, and I can click, again, the carrots to expand and collapse details, and any fields that can be changed will be highlighted and give me those options. Obviously, some things are pretty concrete, right? Social Security, Medicare rates are set. If this employee wasn't was exempt from those, I would want to go back into their profile and mark them as exempt, but I'm not going to do like a one-time adjustment the way that I might for some of these other areas. So that shows employer, employees, the different types that they've got turned on. So if I needed to make any edits here, I can do so before I get into the preview payroll area. So I'm going to click Preview Payroll. And then along the top, it will give me a breakdown of total payroll cost, our net pay, our employee and employer pieces, and then it will show us what the paychecks are going to look like. So in this case, all three of these employees are paper check. It's telling me when to deliver the checks based on when the payday is set up for. If a client had direct deposit on, we would see the direct deposit and when we can expect those funds to be withdrawn from the account. And I have a screenshot of that so I can show you a bit of what that looks like since I don't have it turned on here. So see, this particular company has some people getting paid by paper check, some by direct deposit. So it's telling us when to deliver the paper checks, and when the money will be withdrawn from the bank account for the direct deposits. Come back in here. Now I have an opportunity now to click the little drop down next to submit to save for later. So maybe I wanted to, come back to this. Maybe it seems like something is wrong, so I want to return to this screen later. I can save for later, or I could submit payroll to go forward. And I still have an opportunity here to click those pencils again, right? If we needed to make any changes, maybe we noticed that some hours are missing, or we've got a commission or bonus or something that we should have added in, we still have that opportunity to make an edit. But I'm going to submit payroll if everything looks good. And then it lets me know that it is set. And in this case, I would be printing the paycheck. So in the print settings, you can print stubs to accompany a handwritten check, or you can print to the QuickBooks compatible check stack. So in this case, it looks like it's turned on to print the pay stubs out to accompany a handwritten check. And I could fill in my check numbers, and if I typed the first one, could autofill to have the rest of them filled out. Most of your clients probably are going to want direct deposit, right? And they're going to leverage that option, but some folks still do the checks. Before I finish, I do want to point out that you can view your payroll reports from this window with the paycheck printing and paycheck list. I like viewing the payroll reports from here because this actually gives me the opportunity to export the payroll reports to Excel in one Excel file that has tabs for each of these reports. And there's an area in the company settings where you can select which payroll reports you want to include here. But if I export this to Excel, it's going to open up here for me and show me tabs for each of these reports that are included, right? And maybe I have a file folder or something I want to keep those in. If your client's doing the payroll stuff themselves, this might be something that they export and send to you, right? And then when I come back, I have that option for finishing payroll. And if tax payments are due right away, I've got the option to do it later or go straight in to review and pay. And this is something that if folks don't want to see it, they can say don't show this reminder again. But I don't know why you wouldn't want to get reminded to immediately go into the pay taxes area and see what you have coming up. So now it's brought me into pay taxes. I'm going to show you what it looks like if we kind of come out and go back in as well. But this will then list, what's due now, what's upcoming, when's the due date, and then because I don't have electronic payments turned on, I'm getting the option to record. So this is what it looks like if the e-services are not turned on. If they are turned on and it's that enhanced regular do-it-yourself payroll, you'll be guided through paying these electronically, and it'll tell you when they need to be submitted by to be paid on time, kind of based on the lead times for federal and state. Some of the states, have a bit more of a lead time, so it'll let you know when does it need to be submitted to be paid on time. Now, if we're recording it, it's just going to surface the due date based on how the profile, right? When we go into payroll settings, how the profile is set up for this company. Are they a monthly or semi-weekly or quarterly depositor, right? Or an annual? What kind of filer are they? So you'll see these sort of reflect what's set up in the settings. Now, full service, that's part of the initial setup. And because Intuit's handling that for you, if changes need to be made to it, most of the time we know, right? We'll say, hey, this employer is running payroll to the point where they're a semi-weekly depositor. But, if something had to be changed, you'd work with the full service team to make sure that that's all being done accurately and on time. But if I were to go into record a payment, it guides me through, shows me the bank account, shows me the payment date, right? I could do earliest, latest, other if necessary. Now I'm just recording. I'm not submitting electronically. Again, it'll look a little, just slightly different if we're doing that. I can record this payment, record and print. If I just click to record, it's going to pop up and ask me, do I want to skip printing the form or do I want to view it? So even if we're not using the electronic payment method, it's going to give me the information I need, right? So if California has a payment coupon, I'm going to get that option to view and print out that coupon. Oop, and you have to have your pop-up blocker turned on. Sorry about that. I was doing some reconfiguring of my settings in my browser. So, all right. Well, here I'll show you what happens. What happens if we, miss printing a form? If we need to look at what we've done, we can view the tax payments we have made in that section. All right. There's the federal unemployment. Well, here we go. This is the, there's no smoke and mirrors here. Let me look at my tax liability report. I just did California income tax, so let's see, or was that, all right, maybe I didn't record it. Okay, well, I think you get the idea here. We go through the pay taxes to see upcoming and recorder payments and return back to that. I think it's because my pop-up blocker may have mess something up here, so sorry about that. Let's look at the reports for payroll, and we'll see, maybe we can drill into the details from there. Okay, so on our reports tab, if we scroll down, we will see payroll reports. These are only going to show up, of course, on clients that have a payroll subscription turned on. Not going to open every report, but I do want to draw your attention to our newest, which is the payroll summary by employee. Folks that have come over from QuickBooks Desktop and into QuickBooks Online might open the regular payroll summary and say, this doesn't look like what I was expecting. The payroll summary here is a little bit more consolidated, whereas the payroll summary by employee is what I think most of us think of when we think of this kind of summary report. It will show, by default, last pay date, but I could narrow it down for this quarter, this month, custom date range if I want. I can also narrow it down by active employees, inactive, all, or open it for individuals. And I can make some changes to the display. I can look at it by employee or by period here. And I can add columns for hours and rates. And if I do make any selections here, I want to click Run Report to see the changes so I can kind of check things on and off here to update. But this will show me the breakdown of the payroll and the taxes and the employer taxes and contributions, the total amounts, and then each employee for whatever period we're looking for, right? Now if I go back here, there we go. A couple other reports commonly run, so the payroll summary by employee for sure. Payroll tax and wage summary. This is going to show me the breakdown of taxes for each. Oh, yeah, bounced back. Hang on. Not sure what happened there. Let me jump back into the client. I think I got redirected. All right. Not to worry, we're back. Payroll tax and wage summary. Again, choosing the date range, default last pay date, but I could, if I'm looking at this quarter, can choose that and click Run Report. And this will show me each of the taxes involved in this company, total wages, excess wages, taxable, and tax amount. And something to know here, if I drill down into one of these taxes, it's going to show me which employee makes up these wages, right? How this is all coming together. So if I were looking at federal, I'd probably see all the employees and how things total up. Whenever I'm in a report, I have an option in the upper right for share. This is the drop-down where you'll find exporting to Excel or printer friendly. And then the other one, payroll tax payments, payroll tax liability, those two here, if we needed to see what the tax amounts are for the period, what's been paid, and what is owed. So I guess that the tax payment I recorded earlier must not have picked up. So I'll go back in and see. It's probably in like a pending status because the pop-up blocked. You know what? I'm realizing because of that, I didn't show you the forms. So let's go back into taxes and payroll tax. So we would see our paying of taxes, and then we'd see our form filings here, right? So broken out into categories. I'm going to start from the bottom and move up. Employer setup forms. This will show anything related to actually getting the company up and running. These are typically showing things that are sort of state-specific, right? Any applications or forms that need to be filled out at the state level. Employee setup has a lot of the same, but you'll see, if there's state new hire forms, authorization for direct deposit, if you want to get the employee a bank verification form. For these ones down here, we actually would toggle between the employees because a lot of the information is pre-filled for them, right? So if we need Elizabeth here to do an I-9, if I click into that form and view it, it's pre-filling the information in her profile a bit here. So we're going to see some, this is a big long form, some of the information already kind of filled out, right? So that the employee is just making any changes and verifying that that's correct. So those are helpful rather than having to fill everything out from scratch. And then annual and quarterly forms. So annual, of course, this is where we're going to find 940 or 944 if that's being used instead of 941. W-2s, W-3, any state-specific annual forms, and the printable copies for the employees. And then our quarterly forms, we'd find if we're using 941, and then anything that's state-specific as well. And as I go through, sort of a similar thing is with the payments, right? If I'm doing an electronic filing, I'm going to see that option here. If I'm not, if I don't have e-services turned on, I'm viewing and having an option to archive so that at a later date, I can go into my archive and see the forms that have been filed or when they were archived. So if they were e-filed, it will show here. So I can always go into the archive to see what we've done. And if we are handling the filing of these forms outside of QBO, if we aren't using the electronic services, we want to make sure that we archive so that we can refer back to what that report looked like at the time that we printed it out and or used it elsewhere. Okay, Stephen's been answering questions, so thank you so much. I haven't gotten a chance to look at that. This is new, awesome, payroll summary by employee. Yeah, that is new. You're asking if it's available in Intuit Online Payroll. I don't believe so. Maybe Stephen can confirm that for us. It is something new that I know it at least is in QuickBooks Online Payroll and Full Service. Some of you might be thinking, what's IOP? What's Intuit Online Payroll? That is a payroll offering we have that's a subscription separate from QuickBooks Online. So it's kind of a standalone product that you can use with or without QuickBooks versus embedded in here. So, all right, great question. Okay, we are coming up towards the top of the hour, but I'm going to keep you all because I want to go through what it looks like if we are figuring out who's the best fit client for this product and the considerations and steps involved in getting somebody going, especially if you're converting from desktop to online. So I'm going to come back to slides, but I will look through towards the end. We have time to see if there's any questions I can kind of show and demo, or if not, it looks like Stephen's taking care of us. So, okay. Best fit clients, kind of similar to QuickBooks Online, right? Looking for a low maintenance solution. When I say low maintenance, when it comes to payroll, we're not updating tax tables in here, right? We're not doing the calculations. All that's being handled in the background. One of the real benefits of having this embedded within QuickBooks Online is that the payroll and accounting is all in one place. We're able to take care of these workflows from end to end. Love being able to run payroll from anywhere, of course. You know, we can, anywhere we have an internet connection, we can get signed in and run the payroll. And I think, you know, we're so used to our connected world and being able to do so many things in our lives from wherever we are that can make a big difference, right? Especially in times of crisis or, oh gosh, we really need to make sure our employees are taken care of. It's great to be able to just sign in and run the payroll. U.S. addresses, so the 50 states, continental U.S., approximately 50 or fewer W-2 employees. So if there are more than 50, this isn't the best fit. You'll see on my next page, we can have up to 150 folks in there, but it really performs best when there's under 50. And then, you know, sometimes there's some kind of HR-related forms for insurance and things that you need if you have over 50 employees that aren't part of this program. Filing 941 or 944 forms, so agricultural employers that need to do a 943, that's not supported. Weekly, biweekly, twice a month, monthly pay schedules, pretty standard. And then one or more offices, but no roaming employees. So I meant to talk about this a little bit more when I was showing, you know, an employee that lives in Arizona, but their work location is set up in California. When I say one or more offices, you know, you can have some employees that work in, you know, one place but live in another, or you can have employees that live and work in the same states. But really, we function on the assumption that that employee has one work location on their paycheck, that they're not jumping from state to state in a pay period. There's no way to divide that out or get the taxes set up across, you know, different states within a paycheck. So if somebody moves, right, that's okay, because then their paychecks going forward will be in that other state. But there are certain roaming situations. It's more of a complex payroll need, I think, but kind of keep that in mind. So here's some things that we don't support in online payroll at this time. Of course, these things are subject to change. Talked through a couple of them already. This is something that we'll have as a reference in the copy of the slides that, you know, if you want to refer back to this later. The ones that I hear kind of come up most often are that you know, what if they're in Puerto Rico, or what if they're a 943 business, PEO services, leased employees. Those are a bit more specific. But I will say, you know, if you feel like you've gone through this and you go, hey, I'm not sure that these payroll solutions are the best fit for my client. Maybe they've got a whole lot of employees. Maybe they've got some complex things going on. There are other payroll solutions that have the ability to connect up with QuickBooks Online and import in information. So if you're going, wow, I really want to move a client to QuickBooks Online, but payroll's holding me back, definitely, you know, touch base with whoever invited you to this webinar. There might be some other options that we can explore that would help you get the client on QBO with a different payroll. But I'm hoping that you're learning from some things today and figure out clients that would be a good fit for this payroll solution. Let's go through some setup basic. And I'm seeing questions, no way to pay an employee who works in more than one location during a pay period. No, so we don't have a way to separate that out if it's, you know, oh, okay, it looks like Steven's jumping in. So yeah, if we have, you know, somebody who moves and we need to make a consideration on the next paycheck, or we need to make some corrections to fix it, but it's not designed to have, you know, support all the time for employees that are roaming around. Okay, so here's what to expect. What is it going to look like if we're setting up somebody in this type of account? Enhanced payroll. If we are setting things up from scratch, we are entering in employee details, the tax info for the company, prior payroll information for the year, and setting up the electronic services of direct deposit and e-file and e-pay if we're going to use those. So those are the kind of core things that we've got to consider. We're going to need all the information to get that going. And I'm going to give you a sheet that shows sort of the details of that. Full service payroll, we have some onboarding assistance and resources, so you're not having to do this yourself. Now, I will say that if you're switching somebody to enhanced payroll and you're doing a lot of conversions, touch base with if you have an account manager or somebody who invited you to the webinar today, touch base to talk to them about, building out an implementation plan of some kind. But really, one of the differences between that enhanced and the full service is the full service we're more involved in getting the payroll set up so that everything is accurate going forward. If you're converting from QuickBooks Desktop, in most cases, the payroll data will convert, and you're just verifying that. And I'm going to go through and show what it looks like. There are some things that can prevent it from converting, in which case you would have to enter in the employee details and the tax info and some history for the year. Regardless of how you're setting it up, these are the things that you should have on hand. I know a lot of accountants that I talk to go, well, of course we have to have this on hand, but your clients might not realize what they need to get payroll set up and get it going in a new system. So the obvious, we need the W-4 and pay information for all the employees, the federal and state tax filing information, and what the IDs, the rates, the pay and file frequency looks like. And then when it comes to what's happened so far this year, we're looking for year-to-date totals for each employee and year-to-date totals as of the last pay date in the prior quarter. Now, we're at an interesting time of year for that one, right? If we're setting up payroll for the first time, we're doing 2019 forward. It's not going to ask us for 2018 information. It's not going to give us the opportunity to get that in there and do anything related to last year. If we're starting a brand new payroll subscription, it's starting in 2019. Now, fast forward to June, right? It's going to ask us to put in information for Q1 and Q2. Payroll totals for the current quarter by pay date. So that is important for this time of year, right? Anything that we've already done in January, we would want to enter in. But if we were to fast forward to March, we'd be entering in just what we've done so far in the quarter as part of the year-to-date history, or April rather, I should say. Tax payments made this year, so anything that's happened already. Bank account and routing number and principal officer info for direct deposit and electronic payments. So if you want to use anything that involves paying out of a bank account, it is going to guide you through some entry of that information and a little bit of underwriting with the principal officer's info to get that going. And then, of course, if we are using direct deposit, we'll need the employee bank information as well. And as you saw in the employee forms, we could print an authorization form to use to help us collect that data. And we will want to include information for employees paid this year when we're setting up the account and the history so that the W-2s and the quarterly and annual tax forms will be correct. Desktop payroll. So if you don't have any clients that are using desktop payroll, this might be a good time to say, okay, I'm good with the webinar. I'm going to go on my merry way. But if you do have any clients that you're using the desktop payroll for, I hope you can stick around and see what that looks like. It's part of the reason I set this up to be an hour and a half so that folks can bounce out if this doesn't apply to them. So desktop to QuickBooks Online Payroll, what does and doesn't convert? What converts? The year-to-date summary payroll data will convert, and those paychecks will show in the register as regular checks. So we would still need to go back into the desktop payroll file if we needed to see the ins and outs of the information. Basic company and employee information is going to convert over as well. And I'm going to get into some reasons why some of this stuff might not come over. If you're saying, whoa, I've had a client convert, but we were missing a bunch of stuff, I'll give you some ideas as to why. What doesn't convert, what we'll need to set up again and definitely factor in that you need some time to do this. Electronic services, direct deposit, workers' comp, any local tax info. I guess I didn't show an employee that had local taxes today. In that area where we saw the W-4, if there's any local taxes for that jurisdiction, it will guide through making those selections as well. In the do-it-yourself version, we don't have like the remittance of that, right? It's going to withhold it. We'll see the information around it on reporting. The full service, in most cases, we handle the remittance of that. There are some exceptions to it. And when you're working with somebody to set up full service, they'll talk through what goes on with it. Okay, sorry, that was an aside. Notes and garnishments. So we'll guide you through getting those things set up too. Before converting payroll, so to make sure that the most information comes over in full so that we're just verifying rather than keying a bunch of stuff in, we want to make sure that the payroll in desktop is cleaned up and filled out ahead of doing the conversion. One of the number one reasons that Stephen and I see conversions not work for payroll and people having to key stuff in is if address information is missing or doesn't make sense. So sometimes people will set up the employees correct, but at the company level, they're missing something, like a zip code, right? That a zip code missing can sometimes create some problems down the road. So make sure you verify that the company employee addresses are entered in. Correct any duplicate employee names or social security numbers. Sometimes it seems like people make some errors with that, where they'll have same person set up twice or two employees with the same social security number, and desktop doesn't necessarily stop them, I guess. But verify those things ahead of this. Making sure the payroll data makes sense. The desktop allows for some customizations that people end up with negative numbers or deductions that are like 130% or higher dates that are after termination dates and stuff that when the online payroll, when that conversion's happening, it looks at it and goes, gosh, we don't know what to do with this, right? And that's a time where we have you go in and actually key stuff in to make sure it's accurate. It's all in the interest of making sure that the payroll data is accurate, right? Especially if we're setting this up mid-year. We don't want to run into year-end troubles. So any other payroll corrections and things that need to happen, best to do it on the desktop side, right? We don't want to bring in messy data to the new QBO file. I also recommend to consider the timing of all of this and complete any outstanding tasks. If payroll is due tomorrow, it might not be the best time to make the switch, right? Run the payroll and then work on doing the conversion. Here's what it looks like end to end, and this is going to be quite a few slides. It was just much faster and easier for me to show this with slides than doing a conversion in real time, especially because I want to show you kind of all the things that might pop up. So after we've converted the desktop file into QuickBooks Online, which as a refresher, that is done by going into QuickBooks Desktop and into Company and export to export to QuickBooks Online. If you're in QBO itself, if you go under the gear, there's an import desktop data, and that'll give you the steps as well and kind of guide you through it. So I've already done that. I'm going to pick up we've already converted QBO. We've already verified that the P&L and the balance sheet on accrual basis for all dates match, and we're set with the QBO data. So you want to do that first. And then come into payroll. Come into that workers tab. And how you'll know that the payroll converted successfully is the employee should display their last pay date and paid in the current year, right, 2019, unless maybe we haven't run payroll yet for this year, in which case we won't have to do a whole lot in the setup, right? It'll just ask us, when are we starting payroll for the year? But by January 24th, probably have had a payroll run or a few. So it'll tell us, hey, paid in 2019, yes, and the last pay date. And if you don't see that information there, you might want to go back and figure out, hey, is there something that went wrong that caused the payroll data to not come in, and then repeat the conversion. And of course, our folks can help with that if necessary. So here's a close-up of what that looks like. You'll see a complete payroll setup button and those options for last paid in 2018. Now, if somebody is terminated, I think we've got terminated Terry here, right? She hasn't been paid in years. Her thing won't be turned on, but everybody else that was paid this year would be. Verify, fix any information with the business address, the phone number, the contact name and email, the stuff that came over from QuickBooks Desktop. Sometimes people have the full business address, but they might not have a phone number, or they might not have an email address in there, so it's going to guide through getting that info entered in. The core information here will be on forms, right? The business address, so we want to make sure that's complete. Email address is really used for communications around payroll setup and everything else. So it'll highlight if any boxes are missing information. Or, you know, sometimes this is a good opportunity to clean up if, say, the employer put like some stuff in all caps and other parts of the address not. That can look ugly on the form, so this is a good time to clean that up if it does look kind of wonky. Mapping custom pay types, if applicable. This is an important page because QuickBooks Desktop really lets you set up pay types that you kind of can control the rules around. QuickBooks Online Payroll is really designed to, hey, these are the pay types. And you can click in and see how the taxes and things are handled on the back end, but it's not giving you that whole walkthrough of configuring your own type. I think this is great because it keeps especially small businesses on track. Now you might be thinking, well, I'm an account user, I want to have that flexibility. I totally get that too, but it is designed so that the pay types that are there are what's there. So we would map any custom pay types in Desktop to QuickBooks Online pay types. Now a lot of times it's going to recognize, if you're using one of the more standard things, it's going to recognize what it is and pair those up. But if not, you'll have a drop down to go through and choose these. Here's a little of what it looks like. So looks like it had a custom pay type and it shows what taxes were applied. And so it's guiding me through making a selection, and I would see the pay types in QBO that I'd pair this up against. Now, maybe I'd go back in the desktop account and go, oh, this is a pretty standard allowance. We just happen to set it up as a custom thing, then maybe I would make that choice. If I click the link here for options available in QBO, it pulls up an article that details all the different pay types and deductions and contributions and how they're handled from a tax perspective, which can help you make this choice. If anything, this is less common, but if there's any sort of FICA variance, it will let you know, right? It'll pop up and say too much FICA was withheld, and give you the sort of steps of downloading and printing this information to make sure that it is taken care of, right? Could be a rounding kind of thing. It could be from skipping a QuickBooks update in Desktop. So these are things to consider. But probably won't see this, but just in case you do. And then next we are going through the process of verifying or entering in details. So this is where all the employee profile info is going to come in, and the year-to-date net pay is going to come in, and we just want to make sure that all of this came over correctly and that it matches up. Now is not the best time to make changes to this. It's really looking at the desktop information, and it's going to end up comparing that up to reconcile all of this at the end. So if somebody does need a new pay rate for 2019 or something like that, you might want to go through the setup for what's happened so far and then edit the employee's profile to change things going forward. This is more about verifying that what's in Desktop is also in QBO. And I can click into each of these employees to expand their details. As I scroll down this page, down at the bottom, it'll show what did you pay so far this year, and if something looks wrong, I can make an edit to that and go through. Now, this is what these pages look like if we were setting somebody up from scratch, right? We would be keying all this stuff in. So if we are converting from desktop and everything comes over successfully, this information is keyed in for us and we can just verify it. And it gives you a hint on where you can find this information at desktop if you need it. And then federal and state filing frequency and rates. This is pretty straightforward. The steps will vary a bit depending on how many states we're setting up and any state-specific requirements, of course. And it lets you know, hey, this is what you're going to need to complete this part of the setup. At the business level, if workers' comp is required in a state, you might get asked if you want to get a quote on that or not. So you can make your selections there. And then for federal, it guides through, and if we're converting from desktop, should populate the tax ID and the form that's filed and how often the taxes are paid. So it should make those choices for you too. If it's a nonprofit, it might fill that in. And then for state, now if any information is missing, right? If we don't have this, if it wasn't in desktop, maybe it never got entered in. You can say, I haven't received it yet, I don't have it handy, and if you don't know a rate, it typically will just show the highest rate for that state so that you don't under withhold, but we can come in back into the payroll settings and make adjustments to that if we needed to. And it'll tell us that too. When we go to run payroll, it'll say, hey, one of your states isn't set up. We go to make a tax payment, hey, you're missing a ID number here. The e-file setup, if we're paying electronically, it guides through. Now, a note on this. With full service, this is a mandatory step because full service uses that electronic information to handle all the taxes on your behalf. It's optional and enhanced, but it is required there. Makes sense, right? Direct deposit isn't required, but the electronic setup for taxes and forms are. And it guides you through getting this going. If we are e-paying and e-filing, it'll select the states. Now, if a state is grayed out, it's probably because we don't have a tax ID. So when we saw the Arizona, we didn't have the tax ID, we didn't have the rate, so it's not going to have us set up the electronic services yet. I can always go into my payroll settings and set that up at a later date. And then after I get all the taxes and the optional electronic services set up, company payroll totals for the current quarter. So this will give a breakdown of the checks in whatever quarter we are currently in. And I was doing this at the end of the year when I took the screenshots. And then any paycheck history quarterly detail that is missing. So if anything was missing or we need to kind of break things down, typically this is a FUTA employer that'll pop up, and usually it only shows up if we're doing this later in the year. So we might need to do a breakdown. And then once we complete that, it'll cycle through and make sure that everything matches up. What's in the employee profiles matches up with what we're saying the employer totals are for year to date. If there are any variances, we might get a pop-up screen that lets us know that something's wrong. But again, if we're converting from desktop and we're just verifying this information, we should be able to successfully go forward. If we're keying it in, maybe numbers got transposed or something was missing. I commonly see where people are entering it in and they didn't realize that they ran one last payroll in desktop, and so their reports weren't matching up with the data that converted. So another reason to make sure that timing matches out. And then it lets you know when you are ready to go through and run payroll. I know that was a lot in a short period of time. This is a resources page. I encourage you to take a look at these articles and these pieces of information. Payroll 101, for most of you, or if you're an accounting professional, that's going to be old news, but great to share with clients that maybe they're new to having employees. It breaks down all the different kind of pieces of this and the tax elements. Supported pay types and deductions. Excellent to have when you're trying to figure out, is this client a good fit for QuickBooks Online Payroll or full service payroll, right? Are they more complex, or is everything they need going to be handled here? I didn't go through all the steps of connecting the bank account for direct deposit and the kind of FAQs around that, so those are great to look at. Likewise with enrolling and paying and filing taxes, these steps can vary by state, so take a look at that. It'll show you what it looks like. What if you have a client that's using the enhanced, the do-it-yourself, the regular quote-unquote payroll, you can see the electronic services offered by state. Prior payroll overview is really the last handful of slides we just walked through, those different steps with some added support advice. And then what time tracking in QuickBooks Online looks like without an app, and some information about T-sheets if you want to put the time tracking inside of QuickBooks Online on steroids. You can look at T-sheets, or there's other time tracking apps out there. Okay, I'm looking to see what questions, if there's anything. Looks like Steven's handled things. Thank you so much. Steven, anything you thought I should talk about aloud or jump into? Oh, somebody asked about pricing. Great question. So let's spend we have a few minutes for questions here. So QuickBooks Online Accountant. I'm going to go through what it looks like if we are adding a client here. So we're setting up a client with QBO and Payroll from the get-go. Best thing to do is add them through QuickBooks Online Accountant to get the best pricing available. Other pricing, like if the client, if you wanted them to go out and set it up themselves, if they went to QuickBooks.com, they'd see QBO, they'd see the option to add Payroll. There's great promotions there, but they might not be as good of a promotion as you can pass along to them as an accountant. So if I'm adding a client, setting them up, I choose if I want the firm to be billed directly, the wholesale discount, or the direct discount where the client is billed. So when they go into QBO for the first time, they're prompted to enter in their credit card information and they pay for it going forward. So I would make my selection of what subscription level of QuickBooks Online the client should have. Payroll is in Essentials Plus and Advanced. It's not part of self-employed. Somebody's self-employed, they don't have employees. But I would choose, what subscription level here. And then I have the option to add Payroll, and it gives me the pricing for that. Now this, might look a bit different. They've done some different promotions and things. You may see where sometimes it's a higher base rate but a less employee per month surcharge. So we've done some changes with that. I'm not a pricing expert, so if you do have some questions around different pricing that you have in place already, reach out to your account manager if you have one who invited you to the webinar, and I'm sure they can get some details on it. But that's what the wholesale looks like. And then the direct discount where the client is billed, your subscription levels are typically a discount for 12 months here. And then you'd see the payroll, and it looks like in my account we're showing a 12-month discount there. So I hope that helps with pricing. Now, if somebody already has QBO and they go to add payroll, like if they're subscribed to QBO, but now they hire their first employee, if they go to add payroll and they're on your wholesale billing, it'll tell them to contact you, because QBO and payroll is kind of all one thing as far as billing is concerned. It does bill separately, but the subscription promotions and discounts and things are bundled together. But if somebody's paying themselves, it'll let them add, and it'll show whatever the current pricing is. So they would go into the Workers tab, and it guides you through setting up payroll. So I hope that helps with the pricing question. So that per employee per month charge is not per payroll run. It's just per active employee per month. Okay. Looking to see if anything else. I hope that clears that up. Oh, I mentioned way up front direct deposit for contractors. So I didn't really talk about contractor stuff today. But if your client has a payroll subscription, if payroll is turned on, you can also go into that workers tab and into contractors and set up to pay contractors via direct deposit as well. That wasn't always available in QBO. We rolled it out last year. And so when I go into workers, I have employees, contractors. Contractors are any vendors that are marked track for 1099. And we would see an option along the top to pay contractors with direct deposit. And the pricing here will be based on what the surcharge is per employee per month. It'll match that. So in this account, it looks like they've got $2 per employee, but the base price is probably a bit higher maybe. So you might, your pricing for your clients might be where it's a lower base price, but $4 per employee per month. So the contractor price will match up with that. I know that's a little confusing. I hope I'm explaining that well. But it lets you know, that you can pay contractors that way as well, and then, prepare the 1099s at year end too. Okay, that brings us right up to the end. I'm going to give you all a little bit of time back in your day. You'll get a quick survey after the webinar. Please let me know what you think. This is a newer webinar for me, so I'm always looking to make changes or add more if there was anything you thought was missing. Any other webinars you'd like to see us do in the future, I'd love to hear that. During tax season, I typically step back and say, hey, what else can we teach on? So let us know what you think. I hope that this was helpful, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks for spending time with me today.